Mario Kart is classically known as a game for solo players, but the online community's kind of turned it into a 6v6 team game. I've done a lot of videos before on why 6v6 is preferred by the online community for the most part that you can check out on here or somewhere else, but a lot of people don't really ever question why. Many players just join the online community, have fun playing in MKU with their friends, and they don't think about it much more. And I don't think many players actually understand the drastic gameplay differences between 6v6 and, free-for-alls or your, solo competitions. So today I wanted to talk about those differences, explain it a little bit more for those that may not fully get it, and talk about things, to consider to give yourself a leg up in your 6v6 tournaments. Before we get started though, quick announcement. A lot of new content regarding player improvement is on the way on this channel, and a lot of that content will have this video referenced a lot in it. I'm really going to try my best to provide the community with fresh new content that you can't really get anywhere else. So if you're interested in track guide series or something similar that's going to be coming up in the future, I'd appreciate a like and a sub. I believe you'll find something useful here in the near future if you are a new or a mid-level player looking to up their game. That's the main demographic I'm going to go after. Hopefully it will be interesting. Anyways, back on the subject, there's a few obvious differences between solo and teams play, and I'll address those briefly at the end, but let's talk about what to expect out of gameplay itself. So when most people think about this game, they think about all the items that can hit them. As a result, defensive play, becomes kind of the staple. It's a very natural response for most players, especially when players get up to first place, because they don't want to lose it. I think most people would agree. Let's not back any bananas in first place, because if we give up our only defense, a red shell might come and hit us. The reason why this mindset is so often a winner is because you and only you are solely responsible for your own success in, your average worldwide race. You don't have to worry about anyone else, so what does it really do for you if you were to hit one of your opponents and make them get third place instead of second? Now, the risk and reward clearly goes in the favor of defense and over offense in this situation. So a lot of people that grind the solo queue come to a quick realization that the fiercer the competition they play, the less they'll be able to dominate up front. The quick adjustment to this is realizing that if you want to make comebacks, coin collecting is important. And this is why when you watch top level players, they will frequently stop and collect 10 coins on that point if they get hit out. And when they get a sufficient amount or a max out on those coins, they will then use powerful items from the back of the pack to catch up, and very frequently pull out good results this way, as a result of, passing the other people that get hit later in the race. One might think that 6v6 plays similarly enough to this, but this person would be quite mistaken. Some skills translate quite well, such as running ability or being able to dodge obstacles and improvise. However, many things change. Don't believe me? Well, take a look at this. The recent Division 1 champions of Mario Kart Universal, the largest team tournament in the world, have a bunch of below average scores in the solo queue this season. Yet, they won a prestigious 6v6 tournament. They know something that you don't, and we're going to talk about that now. Consider the following. You decide to throw a red shell and it hits the player in front of you. The guy behind you also had a red shell though, and ends up hitting you because you threw away your only defense. You misplayed. Well, who wins in this circumstance? Because the guy that you redded doesn't win, and you certainly don't win either. So the other 10 players do. This was not a smart play in your average worldwide race. However, if you consider this same thing in the context of a 6 versus 6, you hit out an opponent with a red shell and maybe his teammate punishes you with a red shell of his own. Who wins here? Well, likely nobody, and that's because both teams had one player slowed up. On average, this is a neutral exchange here. And what this means is that aggression is not nearly as punished as in teams as it is solo races, even in times where you are a bit careless, because you have 5 other players paired up with you that can score points on your behalf as well. What this means is that if you believe you can hit an opponent and not get hit yourself in a 6v6, you should typically go for it, because if you hit him and get hit as a result of it, then it's not really too bad. It's just, the trade that we talked about earlier. Only in situations where you miss, get punished, or hit a teammate are you really losing. And as a result of this, offensive play is very important in Clan Wars, and this should be a point of emphasis for every single team playing competitions like Mario Kart Universal. Of course, this is not an invite to just recklessly throw items away or to spam, because wasting limited resources without getting hits is also not good. But if your team wants to get better at 6 versus 6, you may need to practice your sniping abilities, your back spams or backs, and ability to place items in tight windows without hitting your teammates in the process. Being proficient at all of these things will help you out immensely, and also boost, your Twitter clip potential, of course. And if you're bad at hitting opponents, this should be an area of emphasis just as much as, time trialing is to get faster. What has helped RK climb in Division 1 is that they have some really strong 66 players in their lineup. In a match where many had them as underdogs, they made life hell for their opponents, namely in that Game 1. It's hard to display your front-running abilities when your opponent is constantly delivering hits before your team can ever get the top spots established. Speaking of which, let's talk about the idea of frontal presence now, because this is what wins wars. In many matches against closely skilled opponents, you are likely going to have like 8 races or so where no team really won by a significant margin. What happens in the other 4 is likely going to dictate the outcome on most occasions. There are of course some crazy exceptions that make for crazy races, but there are 2 easy ways to obtain these more explosive races that often win wars. The first way is, through well-executed shock usage. But of course, there's counterplay to this. Stars are handed out at incredibly high rates in this game, so opponents can make it almost impossibly difficult to ever have a perfect window to use a shock that benefits your full roster. Additionally, if you hold a shock for too long, opponents can foil any plans you have with a shock of their own. The second avenue toward winning big is by dominating the front of the pack and holding it to the end of the race. Because the spots you are in throughout the race are the ones you want to keep at the end of the race, this is often the safer approach and the goal of wars, while shock usage is seen as more of a way to break out of a disadvantaged state. Bagging is mainly reactionary toward a failed front-running attempt on most courses. I often like to say that 6 vs 6 is a game of mismatches. This is because if you're surrounded by opponents, you're likely not going to survive. If you are in first place in a team match and the opposing team is like 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th, you are in grave danger. The difference here is that 2nd place is no longer going to have to worry about 3rd place throwing red shells at them. Hell, they might even let 3rd place pass to throw even more at you. And you're almost certainly going to fall to a red shell regardless of how defensive you play in this situation. What a lot of players can't recognize is that when this happens to them in a team match, they aren't unlucky. This is the expected outcome in a lot of instances. Now the solution here is to simply never be in the state of disadvantage to begin with. It is likely that it got to that point because the opposing team was more effective at hitting your allies than your team was at hitting them. By taking advantage of the items you have at the right time, you can prevent these situations, and every time you hit an opponent, you cost them time and coins, and they'll have to spend valuable time catching up. Offense is sometimes the best defense in this regard. Now here's the other big difference. Say that the guy in first is successful at hitting the opposing team out. Like we established earlier, lots of top players take their time to bag and get coins and all of that. And this, however, is not as good in Clan Wars because, as mentioned, the game is all about mismatches. For every second you spend in the back collecting coins, there is more time that passes where you are not in the front of the pack to help your teammates who are out, and they will likely be outnumbered and will lose more exchanges as a result. Now, if your team is unable to win that battle and the opponents establish a top 4, then good luck. Because in the free-for-all discussion at the beginning, we mentioned that lots of players get good personal results by bagging early in races. This will not work so well for you in 6v6, because if the other team has top 4, they will be purely front-running and nobody will be throwing items at each other up in the front. The upfront action that you might rely on in order for your comeback to happen will be off the table, and next thing you know, you could be dealing with a -20 race loss. One of those races that, impacts the final results. And at this point, you will either need to win a battle up front, where you are heavily outnumbered if you are up there in a 1 vs 4, or you'll need to get a good shock off. And when you have an opponent that is willing to counterbag and make it hard to use a good one, this can be tough. So in summary, offense matters a lot more in wars than it does, in your free-for-alls, where you may want to be a little bit more defensive. And I would say that it matters to the point that focusing on yourself in the way that you would in an FFA can actually be harmful to your team's performance. I think this is why some strong lounge players can struggle in wars at times, but fixing that would simply be a matter of expanding your skill set. Of course, 6v6 is about other things too, like communication, camaraderie, selflessness, teamwork, but these things are more obvious. And remember, at the end of the day, 6 vs 6 isn't just about you. It is that way by design too. And you should be happy it is that way, because a 12th place race can be a lot easier to swallow if your team still kept it even. What happens to you personally may not even be bad for the team in the end. So, in summary, Don't be afraid to go after the hits and learn how to deliver them, because if you do, that's how you're going to effectively keep the top spots of your team, and that will lead to better results instantaneously. And that's it for today. I think I tried to keep it kind of brief, but I think it's still good to, get the ideas out here. But anyway, we'll be talking about all of this more in the near future, of course, so, like I mentioned at the beginning, stay tuned for that upcoming series, and we will see you next time.